Hi folks, Andy here again. I'm recording some of these videos back to back, so the reason why I look the same is it's literally been done at the same time. Cold in the house, it's still Boxing Day. Literally just done a review of, or at least a ranking of The Dark, number 17. So I've moved on to number 16 now. Again, I think these three in a row are all quite indeterminate. They could be on any given day in a different place, but this is just how I'm ranking them. So at number 16, we've got Sepulchure. Never been able to pronounce it. Don't know why. Just me being thick. His novel from, I think it was 1987. This came out. I think it came in 1987. And yeah, this is another one of those really fantastic story ideas that doesn't quite work as well as it should. So the heart of this, you've got this counter-terrorist guy who, well, he's a counter-terrorist guy who's hired as a bodyguard to this really unlikable, weird, mad guy. Because this guy believes his life is in danger, and the company that employ him need him because he's super important to them. And it's very early on, so this isn't a spoiler. It's revealed that this guy has psychic powers, and he uses those psychic powers to outmaneuver and outthink the competition of this company that he works for, which means the company get rich. And obviously, because he's doing all this, he's the most valued member of this company, even more valuable than their president. So he's got his own strange little penthouse, as well as his own home. And he is he's super valuable, but he's also really, really antagonistic and unpleasant and unlikable. But his sort of demands are met, and he's asked to be protected. And he decides to go back to his sort of like home. I think his home's called Neath. Um, and it's this sort of like big country house in the middle of nowhere. And he wants to go there and have this guy protect him. I think the guy's name's Halloran, who's protecting him. And the guy name's Halloran. I think the crazy guy's name's Klein. It's been a while since I read this one, so I'm just trying to remember what those names are. But I'm sure the security guy is named Halloran. And anyway, while they're there, things start to happen slowly. Because Halloran doesn't believe that this guy Klein is, and if I've bodged these names, you just go with it, is psychic, and he's showing him that he can sort of convince people that things exist. Not only can he see stuff, but he can make you believe and think things. And he's quite nefarious, and there's also some odd stuff going on in this house, which I won't spoil. But you've also got a side story about Halloran's past. And about these, I think they're members of the IRA, but they're terrorists at least, and some of those have got unfinished business with Halloran. And I'll tell you what, without spoiling it, what I did enjoy about this story more than anything else, which surprised me, was the fact that the way in which it all comes together and gets resolved, and the way in which the premonitions. You think of one thing, but they're actually kind of relating to something else. There's something here about you can't escape your past, and predicting your own deaths and outcomes and all that, which I think this book does really well. And it also reminds me a little bit of the sort of path that another author that I will be talking about later on in this series, Sean Hudson, kind of went by, where he used to write sort of pulpy, really horrible stories, and then he sort of changed and went into sort of like counter-terrorism, sort of espionage style books, but with horror slants. There was horror elements to them, some supernatural stuff going on, and then he kind of fused the two. And this kind of feels, because it's not the first book that Herbert did like this, but it feels like this is a territory that Herbert was thinking of going in, where he'd sort of have half traditional horror and half sort of like counter-terrorism stuff in the same book. And there's a lot of backstories in this book about characters that you'll meet. The Klein's got a few servants, and you find out a lot more about them in backstories, which was interesting. One of them in particular, who's escaped the Nazis, And I can't remember if it was German or Polish, but we have his backstory from him as a young man, all the way until he ends up meeting Klein, and he goes through a horrific, just ordeal, and it changes who he is, and he does some really grim stuff. But it was fascinating to have backstories of these characters that are only minor characters in the book. They're servants, but they have personality because of this. There's another one in there, an Arab, that I think was a little bit. It was a bit odd, a bit. I mean, these books are very much products of their time. A lot of people go on about Richard Lehman, right, with his portrayal of female characters and his abundance of sort of sexual assaults. But a lot of people don't look at somebody like Herbert, especially in the 70s and 80s, because I did mention in the dark, actually, in my last one, how it is a product of his time, because you do have some strong racial slurs and stereotypes and body shaming and even religious sort of debate and homosexual sort of like stereotypes that are all, these days, I think people would find them way more offensive than they were meant to be. And this book also does it a little bit, and it's just a product of its time. You know, people back then were introduced far less to multicultural society. You know, things like homosexuality was still seen as, you know, not a thing that's paraded these days. Even other beliefs for the UK, you know, predominantly was either atheism or Christianity. Other belief systems, although they're rampant now, were often seen as lesser, and I guess even to a point, you know, people of different colours other than white were seen as the minority, and a lot of their cultures and ethnicities weren't well represented. There's a film that I think came out in 1980? No, it can't have been 1980. It was probably way before that, maybe 1970. I'm going to guess somewhere in the 70s. Horror Express. Christopher Lee and Peter Cushing on a train, right, with some sort of living caveman that gets drilled. Great film, really like it. But it's got a bit in which there's a monologue that Christopher Lee serves very early on where he's talking about the dark forces. One of the dark forces he mentions is yoga, because at that point when the film was made, yoga is almost like, you know, the mysticism about it. It's like martial arts. Back in the 70s, martial arts was seen as like this mystical thing from the Orient that gave you special powers and stuff, you know. Whereas obviously the more exposure we've had to it, the more we've realised what it actually is. Yoga was the same sort of thing. It was seen as like a bit like voodoo. It's the occult. It's yoga. It's a dark force, which obviously it isn't. But what I'm trying to say is, obviously, back when things like this were written, there was still a slight, although this is 80s, so this has got more, less of a reason, I think, for it, but there was still a sort of lack of either acceptance or tolerance towards things, where these days it's very, you know, especially sort of for me, growing up, it's weird looking at how diverse society is now compared to when I was a kid. So even though this is like a late 80s book, it still does have that sort of 70s mentality, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. Anyway, just a side tangent there. I like all of that, and all the sort of psychic weird stuff going on. It's got a lot of that. Is really, really good in this book. But so why, if I've praised it, is this at number 16 and not higher? Well, it's not a bad place for it, you know. Yeah, I think the main thing is because it's another very slow book. It's got a lot of filler. There's a lot of bits where it's plodding and the plot isn't progressing, or it focuses on a couple of backstories a little bit too much. It's also a bit jumbled in how it goes forwards and backwards between not only scenes but characters and even times. And it kind of deliberately makes you wait to the very end to give it its big reveal. And the big reveal doesn't, in the same way that The Dark kind of felt anticlimactic, doesn't justify the length of the story. It feels anticlimactic and even a bit odd. I don't understand at all the motivations for the main, I won't spoil them, the main villain, and why they were trying to do what they were trying to do at this point. I understand they have a plan, but the plan just seems to be, let's drag this out needlessly. It's really weird. don't get it. And a lot of and a lot of things the villain does then are really just bodging their own future, because even if their plan was successful, they then are in a situation where they're gonna struggle. So it was just weird, and a bit drawn out. There was a bit of treatment about some characters as well that didn't need to be there. There's a few excessively violent or sexual bits in this book that didn't need to be there because they don't do anything for the story. I'm fine with stuff like that happening as long as there's a reason, it motivates a scene or an event, but it doesn't really here. On top of that, it's a bit unsure of what it wants to be, because it is a sort of hybrid book of catechism and horror, but it kind of just goes between. It's a bit mishmashy and sort of drags a bit. And whilst I love its individual parts, as a collective whole, I'm less pleased with it than I wish I was. So ultimately, it's at number 16. I like it. I just don't love it, and I don't think it's worthy of praise as much as some of the other books on this list. So that's at number 16, Sepulchure, however you pronounce it, from 1987.